The largest of the island was the Great Copeland Island. There are three. A middle one was originally called either the Lesser Copeland Island, Cross Island, or Laune, Lawn Island. All of those in turn got superseded by a name, Lighthouse Island. Became its name, obviously, after they built a lighthouse on it. It's a peculiarity now that a lighthouse island does not have an active lighthouse, but the active lighthouse is on the next island, Mew Island, an alternative word for a seagull. Of New Island. Newspapers have a tendency to call it New Island as opposed to Mew Island. Mew is the smallest island, the outermost of the three. Also the flattest, the centre island, Old Lighthouse Island. That's a sanctuary for birds. The first real interest in setting up lighthouses around our shores was in 1665 when a lad called Sir Robert Redding, he got a patent to erect 6 lighthouses around the coast. He decided to build one to light the entrance to Belfast Lough. He actually put it on the other side of the lough. It was high up on the hill that's above the current lighthouse. But he was a lot more interested in collecting fees from ships than actually maintaining a light. So that light only lasted about 3 years. In the early 1700s then, the ship owners started to complain. They complained to Queen Anne, and she took the patent away from him and gave it to the revenue commissioners. They decided they would continue to light Belfast Lough, but they weren't going to resurrect the light up at Whitehead. They were going to build it on Copeland Islands. So they built it on a middle island, because it was the highest. It was called Lawn Island or the Lesser Copeland Island. But they built a lighthouse on there and it became known as Lighthouse Island. At that time, the lighthouse was a cottage which had a little bit of a tower, and they had some coal, and they used to have to bring her coal up to the brazier on top of the tower at night, light it from sunrise to sunset. The problem, of course, about an open coal fire is that in the very weather that it's actually needed, it would not burn particularly well in the lashings of rain and wind and everything. And it also burned approximately 400 tonnes a year. The revenue, I don't think they were particularly interested in lighthouses. It was only a hobby for them. That stayed there until possibly even later, 1796, when they extended the tower upwards. There was a new lamp had been invented which burned 6 circular wick lamps. That was called an argand lamp. All fairly good. But then in 1810, the revenue commissioners got shot of the burden of the lighthouses, and they handed it over to the Corporation for Preserving the Port of Dublin, basically in charge of preserving the port down in Dublin, but they gave them all of the lighthouses around the country, so they sprang into action with a huge amount of energy. From about 1810 onwards, our shores almost completely dark to lighthouses everywhere. They built a new lighthouse on the same island, the middle one of the Copeland Islands. It was completely revamped. It was 131 feet above high water, so it was fairly high. The light could be seen for 16 miles, and it was established in 1815. By all accounts, it was a lovely island for the keepers to be stationed on. They were practically self-sufficient. They had sheep and goats and chickens and pigs, and they had a garden for vegetables. A boat came over from Donaghadee every week with a few extras and mail and everything. So everything was okay, except for two things. Number one, the light was a fixed white light. On one particular occasion, it got confused for the light at the end of the pier in Donaghadee. A ship ran aground. The other thing was that although it was on the highest part of the Copeland Islands, there was still another island further out, which was unlit. Mew Island. Ships obviously tended to run aground on the same island. So in 1860, Palace Board sent out a team to assess was it feasible to build a lighthouse. It only took them 24 years to answer yes. To be fair to them, about 22 years was kind of spent interviewing everyone who'd ever sailed a boat on the Irish Sea. But in 1882, they started to build a new light on the outermost island, Mew Island. They painted it black. Black was the colour that all lighthouses were at the time when you were heading into a port on the left-hand side, port side. That didn't actually alter till around 1954 or something, when they painted on a white band around the centre of it. 1884, they built a new light. It was both the light and the fog signal were run the gas produced from coal. Now, the keepers had to produce the gas themselves, and in fact, in addition to keepers, there was also a fella employed to actually produce a gas. The gas was stored in these large 25-foot diameter circular tanks, which were sunk into the ground just behind a lighthouse. That continued till around 1928, and then they altered it again. In 1928, they actually got a new light for the lighthouse at Mew Island. Got it from the Tory Island lighthouse. It's one of the largest lights of its kind, if not the largest light of its kind in the world. And it stayed in there until 2014, when it got moved to the Titanic Quarter in Belfast, where it can be seen now. On Mew Island, they built 5 new houses down in Donaghadee for families of keepers. They normally worked 3 weeks on and 1 week off, but that could alter from time to time. The houses were sold off in the 50s because the keepers didn't like to be told where they had to actually live, and because of the improvements in transportation, they didn't have to live in a harbour near to the boat. So basically, after 5 attempts, the lighthouse authorities got it right, because there was never a wreck there or any area that could have been attributed to the light or the lack of it or the strength of it or the foghorn. It actually worked, and it's still working fine. It was always regarded by keepers as the station for gentlemen. For some reason, it seemed to always to have an older, more sedate keeper there, as opposed to younger fellas. And they always got on really well with a local fisherman. Some fairly astute lighthouse keeper, he built a pitch and putt course on the island. It was apparently in use for many years, until none of the keepers on the island actually played golf. So the light is now LED, somewhat controversially, but still an active light. There aren't any keepers on there since 1996. An attendant still goes out every month and has a look and makes sure everything's okay. And that's the story of Mew.
William Angus from Donaghadee. Lobsters, crabs, velvet crab and brown crab. Spread from here down to Ballywalter and up as far up as Larne, 3 to 4 miles off the shore, and I suppose a range of 20 nautical miles in length. a long time. But I'm also the harbour master here as well, so I do that as a part-time thing now. We just fish for crustaceans. But if you've plenty of money, we'll take you out with a rod if you want.
My family were all fishermen and boatmen, and then I was in the lifeboat for 40 years. When I left the lifeboat, then I became a lighthouse keeper. Well, my mate has a wee boat round in the marina there, and I do a bit of fishing, and still go out and visit the island now and again, like, you know. Walker Simpson, here, born and bred here. Well, they built them high up on the highest island. One was fed by coal, just a coal burning. A donkey took the coal out from a punch that the coal boats left. And then they built this high one. It was paraffin. But they found out that it was too high, and there was a lower island outside. So the ships were being drawn onto the new island, which was the lower one. So they decided then in 1883 to build the modern lighthouses there now, right, which was gas fired. They had their own gas works and all out there. Well, it was built from the rubble quarried on the island and then cemented by Portland cement. It was operating in 1883. I think it was 4 originally, and then it became 3, done a month on and a month off. It became automatic in 1996, I think. That's when the last guy left, and then it was me and some others were attendants, just 15 years. Well, you had to go every month to just make sure the oil and all everything was all right. You had to go when workers came. You could have been on for 28 days at a time. Well, the famous one was the Enterprise, and around about 1800 she went ashore there, and there was 30,000 or 40,000 worth of money in coins, and divers came from Whitstable and Kent with the Bell method and retrieved 90% of it. So there's still a few dollars, silver dollars out there yet.
So my father was on the Mew from 1940 to 1944. So he had experience at Donaghadee before we moved there in 66. I'm Richard James. I was actually born in Kerry because my father was stationed on the Skellig's Lighthouse. We were living on Valencia at the time, but with the children coming along, my father wanted to move to a land-based lighthouse. So we actually moved to Island Magee in 1960. And then in 1966, we moved to Donaghadee. And then my father passed away in 1989, and the lighthouse handed over to my mother. When my mother came 80, my mother became the caretaker of Donaghadee Lighthouse. So my mother is still alive at 92. So my mum lives in that harbour house there in Donaghadee. So every year we would go down to Kerry, but we would visit a lighthouse that my dad had been on. So my sister, luckily enough, has been to all the lighthouses that my dad has been on in Ireland. I've missed out on 2. I haven't been to Rathlin, or I haven't been to the Skelligs. Well, he used to always joke. His least favourite lighthouse was called Little Samfair off Phoenix in County Kerry, because it was very, very close to the sea. And on a summer evening, my dad used to always say that the lighthouse keepers could hear the people in the pubs saying cheers to each other, and they often thought about getting a wee boat rowing in, getting a couple of pints and then rowing back, which of course they didn't did. I think the lighthouse keepers were always joking about drinking, like, and my dad, like anybody from Northern Ireland would enjoy a wee drink, but they used to always joke about that they could hear the people talking in the pubs on a clear night. I suppose you know the old story about there was only 2 lighthouse keepers at one stage, and one person died and the other one went mad. They decided after that lighthouse keepers would always work in 3. But as part of the lighthouse keepers, there was also the fitters and the painters. Whenever we were down in Kerry, we always go and visit one of the painters who used to paint the lighthouse in Isle McGee, and was also transferred to Donaghadee. We moved in 1966. My father had to retire from Isle McGee. One of the little treats was we used to have a lifeboat box outside the lighthouse, where people could make donations. So every night, my dad would pick one of the child to go down and go inside the lighthouse, put all the money on the floor. Whichever kid was picked to go down would count it all out, and sometimes on a Saturday or Sunday you would get a huge amount, especially if it was the holiday time. We used to love doing that.